If you want to know the 4 phases of professional development as a physical therapist, you have to tune into this episode. Uh, Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners, and welcome back to those who have heard my content in the past. If you want to know the 4 phases of professional development as a physical therapist, you have to tune into this episode. Before I go on to the podcast, what is new? What is better, greater than last year or last week? What is happening? I'm recording this right after the holidays. So it's after Thanksgiving 2023. And obviously, I'm going through, as all of you are, I'm going through a lot of reflection and what I'm thankful for and what it means to be on this planet and what to do next. That's really what it comes down to. And today's podcast is off of that. As I've gone into my career, what can I give back to the community, and what do you have to look forward to, or what do you need to avoid in the next few years? And I'm going to give a roadmap up to that. But life is good otherwise. I came back, I had a family vacation recently. We got out of way for a little bit, and it's always good to reset. For those of you who've been following me on the podcast, it's a big deal to me. And I tell people wherever you are and what you prefer to do, I think it's good to get out of your house. And what I mean by that is you don't have to take a vacation. I think that getting out of your house gets you out of a zone. It gets you where, if it's your partner or your family, whether that's like an Airbnb or a hotel, or going away to the beach for a full day, or doing 2 consecutive days. I think it's good to get out of your rhythm, in that your brain starts to think a little differently, and it gives you an opportunity to look at what it is that maybe you and your partner want to do next, in terms of vacationing or life or whatever it is. I think it's really, really good, and I think it's very healthy. And so I always encourage my staff, my team, to use those opportunities to kind of refresh. I think that as you work and work, it's good to reflect on just what you've done, get a little refresher, and get some time away. And that for us was really good. So we went out to the beach and we spent some time just literally in a pool on the beach, on the pool in the beach. And so, yeah, so it's been absolutely great. And I'm very, very thankful for all of you. I'm thankful for all my listeners. And, I've been doing this almost 2 years now, which is crazy. And I started out as a crazy journey. Somebody brought an idea to me, I think it was my wife, and we talked about this, and this is coming into an incredible opportunity for us to be able to serve the community, give back to the community. So, with that, let's go on to this. What are the 3 phases? Sorry, 3 phases of professional development. I'll give you a bonus fourth at the end of this. So, this was a portion of this was taught to me early in my career, and I have adapted it, and I'm going to give you what I'm currently seeing. And I tell you this from the deep down bottom of my heart. I think that you need to hear this and need to know this, because some of you are in different phases. So it's called the rules of four. In terms of professional development, and some of this can be applied to whatever it is that you're doing, but professional development in your first 4 years. So let's talk about this. I've been practicing 14 years, and years of practice, and I've had this conversation on the podcast with and other team members and other people I've mentored. Years of practice does not equate to experience level. Years of practice does not equate to years of experience level. Let's talk about that first. Most people think, well, man, this person's been practicing 20 years. They must know a lot, right? Now, let me counter that and say, what if they've been practicing 20 years, but doing the same thing 20 years in a row? Is that 20 years of podcast? Oh, sorry. Is that 20 years of practice? Or is that 1 year of practice 20 times over? So they've only been practicing 1 year 20 times. Or can somebody who has 8 years of clinical practice have more experience than the 20-year veteran who's been doing the same thing 20 years? Maybe the person in 8 years has done incredible things, And this is just an example. So maybe they did a residency, maybe they practiced in, professional sports, and they did, collegiate sports, and they did all these different ventures and all these experiences. Now, they didn't treat the same amount of people, right? So somebody 20 years in, I can't argue that they've treated so many years, but somebody who was 8 years has treated a various amount of people in various settings. So they've seen a vast array. Now, there's somewhere in the middle that lies this happy medium. I don't think years of experience tells you how good somebody is. It tells you the number of people they've treated. I totally get that. But if they didn't get any, and these people, they really haven't grown. They're just doing the same thing over and over again. They give the same 3 sets of 15 of glute sets, clamshells, and whatever. And they give it to every single person, whether it's 65, 25, or 30. And they check in, check out. And that's not a problem. I'm just telling you, beware about what's to hit right now, because I'm going to tell you these rules of four, and you're going to find yourself in some of these in some of these segments, and you're going to say, "Wow, either I hope that never happens to me, or I'm stuck here and I need to get out." All right, so here's the rules of four. As soon as you graduate from PT school, you have the first years of four. And this is where you're kind of like a novice. You're like a fledgling. You really don't know. You know a lot, but you haven't implemented anything. And this is where you're the biggest sponge, right? This is like if you've been practicing a long time and you had a 30-year PT student or a new grad work next to you, you know who these people are. Like super motivated, super inspired. I'm going to change the world. I'm gonna make sure every patient or athlete has like the best outcomes. And it's refreshing to have these people in your world, because you're like, oh my gosh, I forget what that feels like. It's so refreshing. It's good to have. And this is the first 4 years. Like this is where they are. So let me tell you what the first 1 to 2 years look like. You're motivated, you're inspired, and you want to change the world. And that is usually the first 1 to 2 years, right? And then around years 2, 3, and 4, you get comfortable. You're right, like, oh, that inspiration was hard to maintain. And then you start coming down. You're like, oh, but then there's paperwork, and then there's like all this other stuff and home programs. And then I got to document more. And then there's like billing, and there's Medicare, and there's all these forms. I'm not that inspired anymore. And it really had nothing to do with the patient or athlete or the patients. It had to do with the logistics of the job, right? Just like to be able to satisfy minimum requirements to be able to service people. Now, for some of you in various settings, you're in a you're professional sports, you're in collegiate sports, you're in a cash-based setting, whatever you are. Either way, there's still logistical barriers to everyone's role. Even if you don't take insurance, there's still have things you have to do. And so most people, regardless of whether it's whatever setting they're in, they start getting comfortable around 2, 3, 4. And the reason why I can say this confidently is that I mentor lots of clinicians, and this is what I see and hear. So you're probably not in your head wherever you are right now. All right. So in the first 1 or 2 years, they're like, oh, they're inspirational. They want to crush the world. 2, 3, and 4, years 2 and 3 and 4, they start getting comfortable, especially at that 2, 3 year mark, right? Especially depending on the setting that they're in. And then they start to approach burnout right around 3, 4, and 5 years, depending on the setting. You work for a huge mill, of course, you're pumping, 28, 32 people a day. That's not sustainable. You don't love it anymore. You work in a cash-based setting. Sure, you still love it, but it's still like maybe you're by yourself, or you only work with one other person. So you're not getting a lot of mentorship. You're still kind of getting comfortable or burnt out. Somebody in a hospital works in maybe collegiate setting, the pro setting or collegiate setting, man, you are getting burnt out. I did pro sports 7, 8 years in a row, and man, that is a beast. It takes a thick skin to be able to do that, and it's not for everyone. And I say that confidently too, because I've mentored people who've been professional sports and like, I'm not going back to that. And then you have the newbie, at 1 or 2, who's like, I want to be work pro sports. I want to just conquer the world. Yeah, but there's also, you see these waves, and a lot of people, it's hard for people to sustain professional athletics for more than 5 to 10 years. It's just very, very tough, because most of the time it's difficult on the family. That's where it really comes down to, a lot of travel and everything else. So the first 4 years, you're motivated, then you start losing it, you get comfortable, and you're either burned out, or you start to do these waves based on either mentorship or good work environment. So let's talk about that. So how do you prevent the the decline in motivation, there's two things, and that's accountability, right? So I think that there's motivation and accountability. If you ask me, Chris, what's more important, motivation or consistency? So, or motivation or accountability. I think accountability is fantastic. So, what I mean by that is motivation requires effort that you have to put in like highs and then you can crash down on lows. So somebody who like yo-yo diets, right? They're super motivated and they come back down and then they're like, I'm gonna do it again. It's so much harder to get momentum anywhere. So if you had a car that ran out of gas, you've done this, I've done this one time, uh, and it's ran out of gas and it's still, and you have to push that car, it takes a lot of work to get it going, just to get the tires going. But once you have it down, it's easier to keep pushing. But now, if you're tired and you can't push it anymore, you have to restart it again, and that's overcoming like momentum, right? So for you, starting or pushing a stopped car is harder to do than continue pushing it regularly. So years of trying to go yo-yo diet or highs and lows motivation is going to be hard to sustain versus somebody who just puts in consistent effort, 80%, just doing the darn thing and pushing themselves on a regular basis. Somebody who can eat clean regularly, like this is a person who's doing a diet, but they're not doing a diet. They're just eating clean regularly, 5, 6 days a week. And then they have their like 1 or 2 days where they really don't care. I think that's more sustainable, just like nutrition, to be able to do in clinical practice. And if you're not in a good work environment, it's very challenging to do that because it requires that you're self-motivated. And not everybody on this planet is. I have to say, I truly understand 1% of 1% of 1% of the 1% can maintain high motivation at all given times and push themselves. For the rest of us, it's about pushing constantly and being surrounded by others. And the hardest part for you to do is stay in a good work environment and be accountable. Most people, they're like, well, I don't want to be in this work environment because, all these people push. I don't want to be pushing anymore. Or they're complacent, so I need to work somebody else. You got to figure out what it is that's going to make you tick. Most people want to get away from all this work so they can like think that they can push themselves, but the reality is it's very difficult to sustain, not sustainable. It's better to put yourself around like-minded people who are going to push you there. So that's why it's very critical in your first four to get a good work environment, or the second part is a mentorship. The reason why you do mentorship is three reasons: motivation, accountability, and education. Education, I think, is why everybody goes to find a mentor, right? They're like, I want more information. The reality is, you're not looking for more information. You're looking for somebody to help you digest information and help you forecast and plan. What you think is you need information to help make you a better clinician. False, because you listen to this podcast, you listen to, things on Instagram, YouTube, whatever it is, that's all education, but you're only learning and you're not growing. Growing requires implementation. And the reason why you get a mentor is so you can implement. Somebody who holds you accountable and tells you, hey, these are the 5 things I want you to work on, come back. If you don't have mentorship, which pushes you to be able to digest information and push forward, then you're just constantly learning, you're never growing. So I tell people all the time, you go to mentorship for the education, hands down, but it's going to require constant accountability to be able to push you. And sometimes you do need a kick in the pants, which is motivation. So although most people look for education, you need the motivation and you need accountability. That's what's going to push you into growing. Learning is nothing on this planet. You're just a well-informed individual who can't make a difference. And I think that you need that, and it's very critical in the first four. Now, the next few phases of four are going to be important as well. But I think the first four, build those habits and you're good to go. All right. For some of you, you're in your first four. Next, the second four. Second phase of 4 years of practice. This is where you're an intermediate. You're really starting to, you got past the burnout at 4. Good for you. Congratulations. You've maintained or been able to get up and down and out of being too comfortable and avoiding burnout. So it means you've been able to self-motivate or inspire or get inspired. Maybe you had a really good mentor or work environment, which is fantastic. And at this point, your second 4 years, you start thinking about mentoring or becoming a CI, and being more impactful on helping others think differently as well. This is where you're still making mistakes in clinical practice. You still have to go and research articles. You still have to look up what you're doing, but you're not making as many mistakes. You don't have to think so much during your sessions. You kind of have an idea where things are going to go or what exercise you're going to do based on the person's story. You don't have to write everything down. You're starting to develop a rapport around your clinic or around your team. You start having like templates of exercises and things that you want to be able to program and give drills for. This is where truly a structure has come in place. Before the first four, the novice is really just trying to pick up whatever they can, right? They haven't put chunks together. They haven't really been able to create paradigms or guidelines or parameters. They're just taking things and running with it. They don't really have a toolbox. They're just trying to gather as much tools as possible. And the second four phase, the phase two, the second 4 years, this is where the toolbox comes in. Like they're like, all right, I'm no longer taking a continuing education course for like a mobilization. I'm taking it so like impact the way I frame how I treat somebody. That's what you're looking for because you're like, I've taken all the courses that were hot and sexy, that were on Instagram, blah, 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 they're all great. The second four, like they're looking now, I'm looking for like, how do I start to build a better frame? I want a better framework and outline how to treat people and maybe manage people. That's the second 4 years. So you're still researching, you're developing a better framework. You don't have to think as much during a treatment session, but errors still do happen and you're always having to constantly improve. But you're now starting to share that with more and more students. You naturally go towards this like giving phase. You're now all about giving back. You want to be able to get other PTs to think differently. You want to impact their professional career too. And so again, this has to do with your work environment and your mentorship. Now, instead of being mentored, you're also now thinking about mentoring. So that's the second 4 years. The third 4 years is now you've been practicing 8 full years. Now you're going the 8 to 12 mark. This is where you're in like the, sorry, 0 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12. Yes. So this is where you're in the mastery stage. So this is years 8 to 12, and you're starting to really challenge the norm. This is where you're like, I want to be a game changer. I understood that I took the very technical CEU courses, and those really helped me impact my practice. I've been mentoring other physical therapists, and I have taken good courses to help change my framework. Now I want to start challenging the norm. This is where I want to change the game. I want to, like, the courses I've taken were good, but I want to adapt that. And you start to, like, talking to other therapists and like, it does this work? And you start implementing it on your patients, your athletes, and actually working. And so you're like, man, I want to be able to help people mold it a little differently. And these are the people who have not burnt out. So somehow you managed not to get burnt out in the first 4 years. And then you didn't get burnt out in the second 4 years. And somehow you made it through. So now you've made it. You're 9, 10, 11, 12 years out, and you have been able to mentor other students and maybe other PTs. Maybe you're now starting to get into the world of like being a clinic director or a clinic manager, or you are doing different things within the profession. You're now doing courses at, CSM or the sports section conferences or whatever it is. You're still now starting to contribute not just locally, but to the profession. That's where this person under the mastery standpoint is. They're formulating those trends, they're rethinking guidelines, and they're questioning more. At this point, you are all about restructuring the framework and not just within the local level. You're now trying to get it outside. So the first four, you're just trying to learn whatever it is. You can't teach it, you're just trying to learn. You're trying to treat, are you ready for this? Your first four, you're trying to teach the patient or the athlete. The second 4 years, you're trying to treat other students or train other students to treat the patients, the athletes. At the third phase, you're starting to help figure out how you can teach other physical therapists within the profession to change the way they educate PT students so they can help with PTs, patients and athletes. The last 4 years, this is the 12 to 16-year mark. This is like the expert, right? These are people who've now contributed to, they can treat the patient athlete like, eyes closed. It's not a problem. They really have to think. They do still do make errors, but they're significantly less. They still have to research to stay ahead of the game. They've taken the courses on, the technical skill. They've taken the courses on like how to change the framework. They have been able to formulate the trends, change the trends. Now they've questioned more. They've contributed to the local community. They've contributed to the profession. And now they're beyond that. These are the people, sorry, I mentioned this in the phase three, but phase four is really where they're changing the game. They're challenging the norm. And if you ask me where I'm at, this is kind of where I'm at right now. And I see it. And I have done a large portion of what I'm talking about. But more than anything else, it's about um, a lot of people have a hard time staying motivated this long, right? And then they have a harder time giving back because it requires more work. It's work outside. It's like what drives people to do these things? And not a lot of people will stay true to it. It's very, very difficult to stay inspired, to stay motivated for yourself. And then to be able to have that same energy and motivate, inspire others, meaning you can motivate a patient and athlete, you can motivate PT students, you can motivate other PTs, you can motivate people in the profession, and you can change the game. And for those of you who are in different phases of these things, congratulations, right? You're listening to it and you're like, shoot, I got room to go. And there's way more room beyond this. And when I get to that next phase of four, I'll tell you, I'll share that with you. But ultimately, my passion is changing the game, challenging the norm, and that's why I've built my my academy of sports PTs because I know what the profession supports, but I also know what we can do outside of that because you only know what you know. And I've said this on other podcasts. If you anything, everything that you know has been taught to you. Everything. How to walk. You had to learn errors, right? There was walls who taught you some lessons. I ran into a wall. I can't be doing that anymore. Everything you know has been taught to you. And the only reason you get mentorship is for those three things. You can get that education and expedite years of errors that you could have made. Accountability to keep you on track because you would have gone ebbed and flow just like yo-yo dieting, and then you also go for the motivation to stay high. And for that, it's hard to do consistently. And if you don't do these things, you're going to be stuck in the first phase for a long time. And now, just because they're years doesn't mean that you ascend to the next group or the next phase just by years of practice. No, you have to survive and be motivated, inspired to get to that next level. Because I can tell you this, some of you or somebody have been stuck in that first fourth phase of 4 years where you're like, I'm not really like into, helping other people and I'm kind of good at my craft, but I really haven't challenged much. And maybe you're looking for that inspiration. Maybe you're looking for that motivation. Maybe you're looking for that accountability. You didn't know it exists. And it does exist. And if you ask me what's my main goal over the next 5 to 10 years is help people understand that other professions have had resources that we haven't had as a physical therapy community. And what I mean by that is there are communities out there that push physical therapists or push other professions to stay top of the game without relying on the APTA or the sports section. Why? Because some of those things may not jive with you. Like they're not built for like today's like growing modern physical therapists. And so for some things are like, oh, I've been hearing that 1,000 times. I've been to CSM. I've heard the same 50 talks. I've been to the sports section. I've heard the same things. And nowadays with social media, with this growing platform, there's this next evolution of the practice of physical therapy is going to be tremendous and will continue to be tremendous. And that's the whole goal, right? Like that's how we're going to do it. And my goal, my vision is to get a progressive physical therapist, a batch of 200 to 300 physical therapists, share everything that I've done in professional sports, residency training, stay up to date with latest research, keep you motivated and accountable, show you what it's like to be in a weight room at a high level and how to program, show you what it's like to be in a athletic training room without being an athletic trainer, and giving the general foundation so that you'd be safe and you can contribute more to the community, especially for those who are in rural areas who don't have the resources to be able to do emergency medicine, to be able to do sports rehab, to be able to do strength conditioning, to be able to offer these things in a package to your communities, including injury prevention, wellness services, whether you're a cash-based PT, you're insurance-based. All of us are trying to do the same thing. Tell people they don't have to be in pain to come see us, not rely on just straight manual therapy to get them through the week and how to get out of pain relief. It's about getting independent people. But the problem is that how do we do that? What are the resources? No education. There's no CEUs on teaching you how to do this. Why? Because it's not approved by organizations. And so my goal is to be able to offer all these things to sports PTs who are looking for something different, who are looking for a community, who are looking for how do I get through these phases a little faster without having to rely on my like local, what if you don't work in a great place, work environment where you have mentorship, or you don't have a good work environment, but you're really stable, you have a family, you have kids. I want to be that answer. I want to be able to support people who don't have those resources, who don't want to do residency, or they completed residency, or they've completed it and they're like, I want to be a good mentor. I want to be able to do these things. So there's a wide gamut on where you are. So if you're in the first four, second four, third four, or the last four, don't assume just because you've had those years of practice that makes you qualified to be in that phase. Some of you have been practicing 16 years, but are still a novice or still intermediate. And I'm not doing that to be mean. I'm telling you, somebody has to give you a reality check. And I understand that people have done that along my way. There's been times where I'm like, oh, I'm crushing. I'm a good physical therapist. And other mentors would be like, no, you need to bring it down a little bit, be less aggressive here, push more, be more aggressive. And I would have never known that if somebody said, like, I didn't even know that was a possibility. They just keep opening my lenses to this bigger world. And that to me is truly the phases of professional development as a PT, not years of clinical practice, how many CEUs you've done, how many initials you have. I can care less about that. I want to know, can you take a professional athlete or any athlete over a whole year and treat them under any given circumstance? Can you, if they have a sprained ankle, treat them the next day and get them back onto the field, seeing them 3, 4 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week, get them back to the field in 3 weeks? Most orthopedic PTs can't. Why? Because they've never had that experience. Yes, you have experience treating ankles, but not under a short timeline, and you haven't been able to manage acute injuries. How do you manage, what taping technique would you do? How many days would you do it? What gets them skin irritation? What are strategies to tape during an event? How fast can you get them back? Can you get them back in 4 days? Is that possible? Yes. My point is you haven't had those opportunities, and if you had, good for you. Now, next, can you get them back to sport, and can you design a fitness program and a strength program to be able to keep them in season with their fitness high during an injury? Can you keep their aerobic capacity using anaerobic and aerobic and anaerobic training with an injury in season? What changes postseason? What are you going to do for them? What about preseason? What's a training program look like? What if they're not injured? What do you do? What's a really good use of time in a pre-injury screen to identify what injuries are going to happen? What if you don't have a strength coach? Can you build out a program for 8 to 12 weeks? Can you manage a whole year for study, postseason, off season, preseason, in season with no injuries? Well, that requires a lot of work, requires programming, injury prevention, which a typical physical therapist wouldn't have. And for me, I want to give PTs an arsenal so they can manage people all year long. The reality is physical therapists will say, well, I don't want to treat somebody all year long. Like, why should I have to do that? You can, but they shouldn't be in pain all year long. You should be able to manage them all year long. And if you're only looking at being a pain specialist, go for it. You're only going to hit a certain profile along a whole spectrum. I'm trying to create physical therapists who can treat along a whole spectrum for a full year, meaning if somebody's in pain in an off season, you know how to treat them. Get them out of pain, great. In their off season, now injury screens, what are you doing? And if they're preseason, can you help build a program, keep them out of injury? And if they can get them out of injury, keep them strong, mobile, and not just using corrective exercises as your strength program. Can you truly build hypertrophy in a general preparatory phase? What if they're preseason and injured? How fast can you get them out? Are you using tape? What other modalities can you use? How are you working with the coaches, strength coaches, everybody else? And you move them all the way through. And to me, that is truly understanding what it is. So for somebody in the first 4 years of practice, in that phase one, might have a hard time because they're just trying to get get all the tools as possible. And the person probably who can start to really process that without mentorship, probably that second phase. But can we get people in that first phase, 0 to 4 years, to be able to do that? Absolutely. Mentorship, education, and accountability and motivation. You better believe that. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I hope that fires you up. For me, this is my passion. It's like what I do. I love to do it. This is what I do with my team on a regular basis. If you ask Chris, what do your mentorship opportunities look like? This, except you now have to find yourself in those phases, and then where are you lacking? So you have to ask where you are in your clinical practice. Are you just getting the tools? Are you starting to use? You have a bigger toolbox, or you have a good solid framework? You're trying to adapt your framework. Number two, can you treat all year long? Do you know what to do in an off season, preseason, in season, and postseason? Next, can you treat acute injuries? Do you really know sports rehab? Do you know strength conditioning? And do you know injury prevention? If you don't, if you're like, oh my gosh, I only knew sports rehab. I'm in my first 4 years. I have minimal tools. I only know sports rehab, and I only know in-season style treatment. There's a large array of things for you to learn. And that for me is why I'm building all my courses. So for those of you who don't know, my upcoming course is a Sports PT Kickstarter. That's January 11th. It's 8 weeks. It's an online mentorship program. So why did I build this? Because I wanted to fill the gaps. For some of you, this has nothing to do with where you are in your phases. This has everything to do with, can you, in a single season or a single calendar year, treat somebody in all stages? That's why I built the Kickstarter. So this is like a way to open your eyes to acute injury management, sports rehab, strength conditioning, and injury prevention. Get that locked in. During my strength summit, which I host around, I can't tell you right now, probably June, July of 2023, that's when I would go into like individual phases of the season and how you change up programming, and if they're injured, what do you change? And then along the way of the phases of where you are in your professional development, you ask better questions. And that's what I've realized. The Every time that a clinician asks me, I'm like, where are you in your clinical practice? Where's the athlete in season, and what's your current skill set? Then I can answer it better because I need to know, do you need the tool? Do you know where to use it in your toolbox, or are you adapting your framework? Then I can answer that better. And I've learned that over time. And I hope that helps you adjust where you are, because most PTs are like, well, I'm not really good with hip pain. Forget hip pain. Where is the athlete in season? And do you know how to manage this? Before I talk about any exercise, do you know how to manage this with the timeline that you're about to do right now? And that's where people get lost. They get zoned in on the problem they think is a problem, but I'm here to bring people out. And so for my Kickstarter online mentorship program, that's what it's about. I'm going to give you the widest lens possible, and then you can kind of see where you need to fill the gaps. And I have plenty of courses throughout the year to help fill those gaps, and then you just adjust to whatever you need. So for those who are interested, go to the website. It's online mentorship. I am in the works of finalizing everything, and it is amazing. It is absolutely amazing. The feedback I've gotten. We have tons of PTs from all over the country, and it is going to be currently it's set up to be Wednesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. and it's going to be amazing. It's just online. We're going through cases. I'm going to give you all the education, map out exactly what it means to be able to help people all year long. And if that fires you up, go to my website, drchrisgarcia.com/Kickstarter, and get on either the waitlist or join me. If not, join me for the following. But I'm excited to see you there. Wherever you are in this world, I hope this podcast helps you. And I hope that you enjoyed a great Thanksgiving holiday, and that you are now realizing that maybe you need to push yourself a little bit more, or you're on the right track and you just need to fine tune a couple things. That's the whole purpose of this. So wherever you are, I hope you're doing well and staying healthy. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care.